Hello and welcome to today's webinar, How to Protect from Ransomware and Simplify Remote Office Backup. This special webinar event is brought to you in partnership with Druva and produced by Actual Tech Media. Thank you so much for joining us on today's webinar. We really appreciate it. We've got a great event lined up for you today. Before we get started, just a little bit of information that you need to know about this webinar. My name is David Davis. I'll serve as the moderator on today's event. And I have really been passionate about this topic, data protection. I'm a former IT manager myself, and so I'm excited to see the latest innovations here from Druva. They've been hard at work coming up with tons of new features to protect companies of all sizes. So this is going to be an educational event for you out there in the audience and for me as well. So we want your questions, and we encourage questions on this event. We'll be doing a dedicated Q&A session at the end of today's presentation. So get your questions in early, and I'll be queuing up the best questions for that session. We also have a number of handouts available for download there in the Handouts tab in your web browser. There's the free Druva trial link right at the top if you want to try out Druva for yourself. We'll talk about that later during the event, of course. And then there's 3 PDFs, how to reduce costs with cloud-based backup, what is cloud-based backup and recovery, and how to simplify remote office backup. So make sure you download those handouts now because they won't be readily available after today's presentation, and check them out after the event. And then finally, if you're attending this event live, we will be announcing the winner of our Amazon $300 gift card prize after the Q&A session. If you're watching this on demand, I'm sorry, the drawing has already occurred. The prize terms and conditions can be found at events.actualtechmedia.com. And now I'm excited to introduce you to today's expert presenter. That is Mr. Peter Elliman, Director of Product Marketing at Druva. Peter, thank you for being on.
Sure. Thanks so much for the setup there, and let's go ahead and get into the topic here. It's one that we care deeply about and have been actively helping our customers address over a number of years. But it's been, I think, as many of us know, even more important today, given the crisis, the COVID-19, and the change in how we work and what's happening around us. More and more people are working remotely, and that's certainly created more opportunities for hackers and those who are looking to really extract or take information from companies. So a little bit on the agenda here. I'm going to talk about remote and branch offices today. They've been around for a long time. I'm going to talk about the landscape of what customers typically look to protect, and some of the challenges that folks face there. How ransomware and backup, where they intersect, and then ways that you can protect against that. And cloud-based data protection is one of the best steps you can take to improving your security posture. It can, and especially as it relates to remote offices. And then finally, some customer stories, actual Druva customers who've made some of these steps and made some improvements. The reality of remote and branch offices is that they're quite varied. And so, you as a customer might have any mix of these, right? From urban locations, if you're perhaps a retailer or servicing traditional consumer buyers. A remote location actually could be in an office park filled with a lot of other buildings, but that just happens to be where your small office is. And then, of course, what a lot of people think of as, and certainly me, is something that's remote. And it might be a small sales office, but it also could be a location where perhaps you're doing work that relates to engineering or mining or energy, logistics, transportations. There's a lot of reasons that companies need to set up offices or locations that are quite far from traditional centers of work and life. But there's some common things really across these. So and this is what makes the remote branch office challenge one that's sort of continued to exist as it relates to data protection today. And one, there's usually limited or no IT skills on site. And typically it is a lower priority for IT teams because it's hard to reach, and typically the idea is they're set up to work on their own. But the other challenge that some companies face is really, one size does not fit all. So in other words, and that's the point really of the three pictures here, is that depending on the industry you're in and your business, your picture of what you need in a remote office is going to vary a bit, right? But there is typically what's running in the remote offices isn't necessarily considered mission critical, but that doesn't mean that it's not important. That doesn't need to be secured and protected from some type of data loss. And then finally, two other challenges that companies face is how to get this data offsite for both compliance and DR purposes, and then how to effectively secure both the data and the IT systems that are providing those services. And obviously that's more of a challenge the more remote that you become. So let's look more specifically though at beyond the sort of landscape, if you will, and the top level problems. What are the actual challenges as it relates to data protection? And the first is really, the operational complexity hasn't changed in the last 5 to 10 years. And we'll talk about why that is in more detail. But that's partially because of the model that companies follow to protect that data, which is a hardware-based model that typically has, I should say hardware and software. And that means that, for these offices, you're typically putting in some piece of software, hardware, and support. And that means you need to deliver, install, test, deploy, and maintain that across a number of offices. The other challenge that sort of remains the same is that, reliability of the backup and recovery process can be hard to fix. And this becomes, again, more pervasive because if someone's remote and there's some hardware on site that's causing issues, ultimately someone may need to be there. And the typical, challenges you might have that might require someone is, perhaps you need to expand the storage, add additional compute capacity, change some network capabilities because of things that have changed there. All of these things, require someone to be there. And they're elements that can essentially affect the reliability of your data protection process. And what this, these steps, this challenge around reliability and this operational complexity are what drive this higher cost. And so that means that even though it's a smaller office, sometimes your cost to protect that data is substantially higher. I should say protect and sort of meet your SLAs. Because again, if whether you have 5 locations or 25 or hundreds, you're in a traditional model, you're sending out some type of proprietary hardware and software to get that done, and that can be a real burden that affects the speed with which companies are able to move, whether they're expanding their footprint or expanding their operations, acquiring new companies, or simply having to respond to a particular problem. And then the final element that we intend to talk a bit more here is the security and ransomware threats. And so as your data becomes more dispersed, it lives in more locations, you need to ensure that you have the same level of security around all those systems. And traditionally, some companies have had difficulty getting the data that's on premises, off that premise, if you will. And so data isolation is, a key part of ensuring that you're able to protect that backup data and then ultimately be able to recover. And then finally, malware can have long times in which it's sort of hidden and not found in an environment, and so simply assuming that, well, I've replicated my data offsite and therefore I'm protected, doesn't always solve that problem. Malware can be replicated if it's gotten into your system somehow. What you see on the right really is just a little visual I added to drive home whatever model you're typically following in a remote office today, or considering following, is typically going to be this software plus hardware plus support, or perhaps some type of appliance with support. And what makes this really cumbersome for folks is, so who's gonna put that out there? Who's gonna manage it, deliver it, and update it? And it's typically going to be you, your reseller, or perhaps an MSP if you're working with them. And they're simply going to repeat what you see there on the bottom and spread that off across a number of locations. That gets your initial protection footprint in there. But A, it needs to be maintained, and then B, you need to be able to then subsequently move that data offsite. That's the DR piece we have up in small talks there. And then you need to be able to test that and be able to have a recovery plan in the event of an event of simply a business need, or worse, some type of ransomware attack. So why the additional focus or concern over backup versus other types of data? Well, 80% of enterprise data is stored in backups, right? Because you're keeping copies of your business data for weeks, months, or even years. But in addition, the continued data growth just means that the surface and the areas for attackers to hit is growing, right? Number one. And number two, you typically are going to have really silos of backup data, remote office, data center, and even cloud for your cloud-based apps. And so these all present areas, right, for attackers to go after. The other element is that the sophistication of attacks, has increased, and so ransomware will really try to get in and attack anything it can, but there certainly has built-in additional elements really to seek out any types of files or other types of indicators that it's discovered backup data, right? And so a great example of that is ransomware that targets shadow copies or snapshots and simply attempts to delete them. And then finally, as I sort of mentioned earlier, the big challenge, of course, is remote and branch offices may not have that same level of security and control that you have at headquarters, just because you don't always have the staff or the folks to keep all of that up to date. And ransomware just needs to find a door in. So what this means for companies really is that if you're trying to expand or grow your business and you're relying on remote or branch offices to help you do that expansion, you have sort of this disproportionate cost and complexity hurdle that you face that you wouldn't face if you were just sort of growing out of your HQ. And so you have this high, essentially, setup cost, if you will, and of course this complexity. It also means, though, that as you have more locations that you're trying to manage remotely, you have a greater challenge managing both reliability and ensuring resiliency. And so, while it's not guaranteed, obviously, that that's going to go down, it simply means, but it certainly presents a challenge. And again, and then finally, the last piece is more data that you have remaining on premises that isn't properly secured can increase both security and data risks that you face. So you need to have the right controls in place. And of course, there is a quote from Gartner, and I meant to include it here, but a big part of being able to recover from any type of ransomware attack is simply having completed successfully backups and having really a history of those backups. And so what I wanted to do first was really just talk about an actual customer who faced some of the challenges we outline here. And this was a logistics company that faced a couple of challenges. First, they'd already seen ransomware hitting other industry players more than once in their environment. So they knew that hackers were targeting players in their industry. Number two, they had inconsistent data protection across the remote offices. And the challenge they had is that they had over 100 plus remote offices. And so their goals were, how can we improve our business continuity capabilities and our DR capabilities quickly, right? And how can we do this in a way that we can reduce complexity for the IT ops team? And this was a real challenge with the existing setup that they had, which was with traditional software hardware. In this case, the customer was considering a traditional approach using Veeam with a software hardware environment deployed into all of those offices. And what they found when they actually looked at how do we respond to this quickly is that getting out and reaching all of those offices and getting the solution up and running was going to take substantially longer, 2 weeks versus 2 to 3 months with the traditional approach. So time to value for this customer was of the utmost importance. Obviously, there were other elements as well. When you can do it at a substantially lower total cost of operations, that's huge. So the time to value came from the fact that you could turn on data protection in a remote office, frankly, in as little as 15 minutes. You could get that protection stance up and running in that remote office without having to send hardware or have a person there. Their outcome really was they saw 30% lower total cost of ownership on their element. They were able to have the DR capabilities that they needed across all these offices. So they had both sort of orchestration and automation of that DR process. So if they lost capabilities in an office, they could fail over and have that data available in the cloud. In addition, they dramatically improved their security posture by moving to Druva. And that occurred because they moved all that data into the Druva cloud. So now that data was isolated from their on-premises location. It was encrypted. And we'll talk a little bit more about the Druva security capabilities to better explain that. And as you might expect, because you weren't having to touch all of that infrastructure across over 100 offices, your operational overhead decreased substantially. So this customer is just a great example, really, of the power of cloud-based data protection to solve really what are some of the common problems that have been around remote and branch offices as it relates to data protection for quite some time, and then really sort of bringing this extra value that relates to security and ransomware protection. So a little bit about Druva and who we are, in case you're not familiar with us. Really, we have been focused on delivering data protection for the cloud era. We have over 4,000 plus enterprise customers, and our platform is built natively on AWS. We've got over 150 petabytes of data under management, so we're well versed at protecting large amounts of data at scale. Our cloud-based data protection platform the SaaS data protection platform from Druva covers a wide range of data sources. So endpoints, cloud apps, and when we say data centers, we really just mean data centers and or remote offices, so those servers you may have, as well as AWS workloads. And by placing all that data into the Druva Cloud platform, customers are able to tap into both the core data protection capabilities that they need for backup and restore, but also delivering disaster recovery capabilities, allowing customers to more easily address their governance needs, so compliance, e-discovery, and archival capabilities. And the compliance piece can be, again, very important in remote offices where you need to ensure or show that you are taking steps to protect that data on a regular basis. And then once all that data is in the cloud, we can deliver additional intelligence to customers around that. So I'm going to talk more specifically, though, right, staying on the topic of cloud-based data protection for remote offices. What does that look like? What are the things that Druva was able to bring to this logistics company, for example, that made them wanna choose and make a switch to Druva. So the great thing about our cloud-based data protection platform is that we support a wide variety of workloads. So no matter what you have running in your remote office, whether it's just some simple file services, or perhaps you have applications and databases that need to be protected, or NAS systems, Druva is able to protect that with a direct-to-cloud backup approach. And if your environment is in the process of moving to the cloud, say with VMware Cloud on AWS, we support that as well. And once it lands in the Druva Cloud, we keep that data in both warm storage, or we can move it to cold storage as it ages. The great thing is once it's in the Druva Cloud, you have multiple recovery options. Of course, you can recover that data to another location, or we have the ability to do failover or failback on a system in your own environment within AWS, right? So within your own VPC, and that becomes that can become a very strong and compelling reason for customers to sort of make the move to Druva, because now you've got a way to address some of these tier 2 or tier 3 workloads that you might have living in the cloud, and to get that very fast failover capability, and then if needed, even a failback. And that can be very important when you have a disruption in a remote office. So we mentioned one of the important things in solving remote office problems is how easy is it to get your system up and running in 5 or 10 different offices. And Druva has been focused on simplifying the user experience. Because it's a SaaS platform, it can be deployed in 15 minutes. More importantly, we can automate protection. So if you're, say, for example, running VMs or other types of systems, we can automatically have new VMs that come up in an environment be protected using things like tags. So you simply put a tag on a VM, and as soon as it's live, it's automatically protected with a given policy. Furthermore, because it's a SaaS-based platform, it's a no-touch update process. So you don't need to spend time checking whether the software, hardware, or any of the other components of that solution are current with given security policies. So we deliver new updates to our SaaS platform twice a month, and it's just delivered to you automatically. And finally, what you see on the right really is just a picture of the overall dashboard that you might use. But we have built-in analytics and insights that help you understand what's happening, at a per office level, or obviously even more granular. But also insights that help you understand what's happening at a storage level, and specifically trends that are occurring at a storage level that can help you actually reduce the amount of storage you're consuming. So identifying really non-essential data that maybe you don't need to protect, which can help you, better control costs. So these can be very powerful for a company that's got many offices and all of that data sort of needing to be protected and handled in a way that's at scale. The other important element that you need with these remote or branch offices is the ability to sort of reduce the amount of data that's being moved across those environments, because they are typically smaller amounts of bandwidth. And global source side deduplication is really a compelling capability that we have to make that happen, right? And of course, it's both deduplication and compression, and we do that across all the storage tiers. So when we move that data into the Druva cloud, whether it's just in warm storage or whether it's moved to cold storage, all you store is the changed blocks. Now, you need more than deduplication, though, to make both the backup and the recovery process efficient. You also need incremental forevers, so that you're not having to repeat the full backups, both at a backup phase, but more importantly, at a recovery phase. So won't go into too much detail, but if you've been doing a lot of incrementals and you need to build a full or a synthetic full, often that can be a cumbersome process. We have your sort of full available on demand, so there's really nothing you need to build in order to sort of bring that back. And lastly, the deduplication piece, really scales as you grow. And because our metadata engine lives in the cloud, not in any one particular remote office or data center, you're getting efficiencies all the time. And again, so the global piece that makes our deduplication different than other types of source side deduplication is this aspect that metadata living in the cloud is then available to any office or any location that's backing up there. And that can make a big difference both in the amount of time it takes to do a backup, the amount of bandwidth that's needed, and of course, ultimately the storage that you consume. Very important for remote offices. So security is a key piece, and one of the reasons we're here and I'm talking to you today. And it's important to look at security really at several levels. So, moving to Druva for many customers has really improved their security posture. But there's some common questions that some customers ask. So first, it's important to know that Druva itself maintains a zero trust architecture model, and so that means that really, there's, as the bullet really says here, there's no way for anyone to access production mode nodes, over SSH. And then in addition, only you control the key to your data. So Druva has no way to access that data. We use industry standard envelope encryption. And as you can see on the right, really, we have multi-layered access controls, to ensure that only the right types of people are accessing the right types of data. The other element relates to our immutable storage capabilities and the fact that our data is encrypted. So certainly there are other folks that have immutable data storage, but what also makes us unique is the fact that our immutable storage is in the AWS cloud. We add data sharding on top of that, so it further obfuscates the data that you have. And really, there's no way to access those blocks. They're not related to anything because the metadata and the data are separated. And the only way to access that is actually through the Druva application. So there's really no other way to access that data. And so by putting the data in the Druva cloud, the data is isolated from your network. You're getting this built-in ransomware protection. And then in addition to that, because Druva is running on the AWS infrastructure, you're getting really strong network security capabilities, part of what both Druva and AWS are going to deliver to you versus you needing to maintain and manage that yourself. So I talked a little bit about TCO and or sort of cost reductions. But one of the compelling things that customers tell us they like about our approach is that we really just have a single license metric for using Druva to protect your remote or branch offices. And that's your post-dedupe storage consumption. So there's no other ingress or egress charges. You don't have a software charge and a cloud storage charge. It's just one metric that you look at. So that makes understanding what you have, and it eliminates surprises. And so when you look at what drives a TCO, and this just goes up as you have more locations, it's this ability to eliminate the hardware and software that you have across many of these sites. It's the extreme storage efficiency that's delivered with global deduplication, and only having one copy of this data in the cloud. And for some customers, data that lives in remote offices has long-term retention requirements. And so our ability to also address those allows customers to eliminate tape. And so in some instances, what customers had been doing was replicating that data to a data center, and perhaps it was being spun off to tape if it was being kept for 10 or 15 years, or perhaps it was going into some type of cloud tier. And then finally, this administration piece that happens. So these are key elements of the TCO. So I wanted to talk about two other customer stories, because I think those are, for me, just so powerful to understand different ways that customers have tried to solve their problems. Because as we saw early on, the setup of remote offices you have and your needs are going to vary. And so the value really of a cloud platform that can address different workloads in different ways becomes much more powerful, right? So TRC is a national engineering and environmental consulting and construction firm. So they deliver services to a wide variety of industries: power, environmental, infrastructure, oil and gas markets. And they had over really 120 offices in the United States and the UK. And one of the drivers for them is that they were growing through mergers and acquisitions. And as you can imagine, that was creating challenges in terms of the different types of IT systems that were being brought on brought into their environment, right? And so they were seeking a way really to move to a single platform to protect all of these offices. And as we mentioned earlier, they lacked the staff to address the changes that were occurring across all these offices, and that and trying to solve that, trying to have staff work with that was driving up the cost of their protection. And for them also, things were further complicated because they did have compliance issues they needed to contend with in terms of where data lived, so data residency requirements. So when you're thinking about, all right, I'm going to move my data to the cloud, you want to make sure that where that data lives is going to help you meet any type of compliance needs you have. And then finally, they specifically did have long-term retention challenges, which was, how do I keep this data for 7+ years? They had a pretty large environment, 300+ terabytes of data that they needed Druva to protect. And the switch for them delivered huge TCO of over 60%. And with Druva, really, they were able to get a single solution to handle both backup, DR needs, and archiving, all from a single cloud-based backup platform. Andreettes is another great customer with a global footprint. And for them as well, given the global footprint, they had regional data privacy and compliance issues they needed to take care of. And they also had challenges with reliability and consistency of backups. And so with rising hardware storage costs and no central visibility, they needed a way to solve this challenge. And customers today are facing that, given a global pandemic that we're facing. Getting hardware, getting people into offices can be a real challenge. And again, cloud-based data protection can make this so much easier. And for them, they were able to reach 200 plus offices around the world, protecting both their physical and virtual systems. And like TRC, getting not just backup capabilities but DR capabilities for all those offices, and tapping into the long-term retention capabilities in the cloud to remove requirements on tape, and also to meet these longer-term retention capabilities. All right, so what are some key takeaways and best practices? Well, first, businesses that rely on remote and branch offices need a different approach to data protection. And a cloud-based data protection provides faster time to value, as we've seen across 2 or 3 different examples here. Ransomware-related attacks will continue to be a challenge and an expense. Right? They've been growing. Some data from cybersecurityventures.com is projecting really or shows a change, I should say, in ransomware damage costs. In 2019, right, they had it at roughly over 11. Excuse me, over 115 million. And then by 2021, they're expecting that to double. When you look at the sort of the overall disruption that's occurred from ransomware, it's affecting cities like New Orleans, local governments, and just our daily lives with threats against things like elections or even academic years. Academic cycles. So it's going to continue to be a real challenge and expense. And the key ultimately to being prepared, and there are multiple elements you need, but one of the most important things you can do is have successful and frequent backups so that you are able to recover from a ransomware attack. As I mentioned, remote offices become another entry point for ransomware. And so ensuring that you're using data isolation and encryption to protect that backup data from ransomware is going to give you a place from which to recover. And for many customers, that ability to hold on to that data for a long period of time, as malware sometimes can remain dormant for long periods of time, means that you have this ability to effectively go back to a point in time, say 30 to 60 days prior, and pull back data as needed. And then lastly, the last challenge is that backup and recovery reliability is typically lower in remote offices due to resource constraints, and whether that's the ability to have people taking time to fix that, or just hardware issues that pop up, or the need to expand storage in a given location. And the ability for cloud backup to scale can really improve the reliability of what you're doing there by eliminating some of those traditional constraints. All right, and with that, I just want to switch over to a little Q&A and just to see what we might have that's come in while we were chatting.
Absolutely, yeah. Great presentation, Peter. We do have some questions here for you from the audience. While we do that, I'm just going to bring up this poll for everyone out there that says, what additional information would you like about the Druva solution? And this is a multi-select question here, so feel free to select multiple. And we'll just leave that up again while we take some questions. So if you have a question about the Druva solution, now's the time to get it in. Peter, the first question I see here that came in, Christopher's asking, would you consider the work from home setups that so many people out there are working from today, would you consider those, just like ROBO environments, or how should the company try to look at those when it comes to data protection?
So the answer is, a work from home setup is really more like a traditional, what I'd call traditional endpoint environment, and so I wouldn't consider that quite the same as a remote office environment. Druva does actually have a set of solutions, right, for protecting the data you have running on your what we call your endpoint or your laptop, as well as even protecting data that you have running in your SaaS applications. But how you protect the data for customer, for an individual employee working remotely at their home or as an individual is a little different than what you might do to protect some systems that it might actually just be running in a small office. But I really focused today just on what the systems that might be running out of again a smaller office or smaller office or location. And so in that instance, you've got some type of server, whether it be physical or virtual, and some type of storage there that's being supported. And another example might be you might have in a retail location or a grocery store or other types of locations where you have systems running and those systems are being backed up, whether it be hourly or a daily basis, and then you're looking to sort of both perform those backups and then move that data offsite.
Got it.
And
okay. Yeah.
Again, love and happy to and I and more specifically, just to address that, I mean, love to go in greater depth on that, what I call that endpoint protection capability. But today I was more particularly focused on the server side. But Druva definitely has a piece there.
Got it. Okay. Next question, they're asking if I'll rephrase the question a little bit, paraphrase it. What do you feel that really makes Druva unique from the competition out there?
Right. Well, great question. So Druva's SaaS-based model, our ability to dramatically simplify the backup and recovery process, ability to deliver highly scalable backup at a substantially lower cost, and our ability to secure the backup process and the data for customers and to allow them to recover that, whether it be at another location or in the cloud. That's been our hallmark. And
okay.
I should add, our ability to do that really across different workloads. And so, many customers start with Druva in different ways. They might start with us for server protection in the data center, or they might start with us for server protection in a remote office, but then they often will then move to do other types of data. So this could be an endpoint, or this could be workloads that they have running or services that they have running in AWS. And so they sort of take a step onto the platform, love what they see, and then sort of start to consume other elements. And just to sort of close out on that, there are a lot of companies today that will help, quote, move your data to the cloud. But the difference is that Druva is cloud native, so we're built in the cloud. We're built on top of AWS, and that is what allows us to drive sort of these consistent savings, deliver consistent sort of lower costs to customers and greater efficiencies. And so I think that becomes really that hallmark for us.
Okay, excellent point. George is asking, how does backup become immune to ransomware? Does it check for file corruption? Would you say that Druva is immune from ransomware, or does it detect ransomware, or does it protect from ransomware in the sense that it can help recover?
Right. So there's two parts to that. There's two parts to that question, right? And so typically from a security process, you'll talk about protect, detect, and recover, right? And so often, the protection aspect, there are other elements that you need to have in your IT environment, right, to protect yourselves from ransomware. And these are the typical network security controls, education for your end users about understanding email phishing, for example. And then, of course, consistent backups are a key part of that, right? So those are the things that you need to do as you sort of set up, if you will, your layers of defense, right? And then detection are the capabilities that you might do to sort of obviously see if ransomware has come into your environment or is living somewhere in your data. And then finally, the recover piece is just your ability to then find the right data and bring that back quickly. And so Druva has capabilities across all of these areas. And so but number one. Number two, as we're talking to in this presentation, specifically, I was focused on on the protect side. So our ability to help you have consistent and reliable backups. And then also on that recovery side, which is your ability to quickly recover data to another location or even recover it in the cloud. So, an example might be once if a ransomware event occurs, the first thing someone's going to do is they're going to you're going to freeze your environment and you're going to try to identify the infected systems. And what needs to happen is that the SecOps team needs to find where that ransomware started, and so they can get to the root of things. And so before you decide exactly what you're going to recover. So I'm not going to go into too much detail there, but back to sort of your original question, Druva helps you improve your posture and your stance by, one, helping you have that regular protection capability, giving you multiple recovery options. And we do have some detection capabilities on our endpoint side where we can do additional work.
Okay, excellent. Another question here, they're asking if Druva has a centralized monitoring dashboard, and can you access it? How do you access it? Is it available on a mobile device as well?
Sure. There's a common Druva cloud platform. You can access really all of the workloads that you're protecting over the web. As it relates to data center data protection, we do need to be largely web driven. I think we are able to deliver some elements mobile, but for the most part, you need to be working on a traditional web interface on the computer.
Got it. Okay.
So you can deliver that over to a phone, but we don't have a specific phone based app for monitoring all that.
Okay. Next question here, they're asking about deduplication. What's the difference between global source deduplication versus other deduplication methods, or source deduplication versus other source deduplication methods?
Sure. And before I jump to that, I just wanted to go back to the question on the monitoring dashboard or mobile app. So as I mentioned, we have a common cloud platform app that or dashboard you can log into, for all of the workloads, endpoints, on-premise servers, data center, etc. In addition, though, we do have both APIs that you can use sort of to pull data into other systems that you may be using. And we also have integration with third parties. So we have customers with very large environments, multiple data protection products running, and they've used products like Bocata to sort of manage monitoring across all those environments. So just wanted to sort of point out those other ways that you can get that data beyond the native things that Druva provides. But back to your other question on the deduplication piece. Yeah, as I mentioned during the presentation, yes, there is a difference between what I might call traditional source-based deduplication and the global deduplication that Druva has, and really that difference relates to where the metadata lives. And so, because our metadata lives in the cloud, that means that when that first backup process kicks off in Remote Office 5, if we've seen that data in Remote Office 10, 20, or anywhere else in your environment, we're not going to have to move a copy of that data or that block. And so we've seen customers with competitive systems who've been quite surprised at the improvements in efficiency that our global deduplication system has brought versus existing pieces. So the power of that metadata in the cloud is great for both the bandwidth consumption you're going to need, and then of course the storage that you're going to consume and ultimately pay for. As I mentioned, Druva's license based on your backend storage capacity, the amount of dedupe storage you consume on the backend.
Okay, and that was another question here. How is Druva licensed? So you answered that based on the storage consumption, deduplicated storage consumption. Okay.
Yep.
And how does the AWS account work there? Does the customer get an AWS account? Is it stored in Druva's AWS account? How does that work?
Yeah, sure. No. So the great thing about Druva is that again, you don't need to have an AWS account. We take care of all that for you. As I mentioned, you license on a single metric, which is storage consumed after dedupe, and you're easily able to see that. We help you size your initial environment, and you can essentially view your trend on a monthly basis. There's no ingress or egress charges, so however many recoveries you need to perform, that's fine. There's no surprises. Now, if you choose to use the DR capabilities, because we perform DR in your own virtual private cloud, the VPC within Amazon, then there are some additional charges. They're not large, but there are some additional charges. But we have many customers who did not have AWS accounts who wanted to do that, and it was quite easy to get them set up and running. And again, it's not like you're paying for a large amount of duplicate data to be stored there.
Nice. Oh, nice. Okay. Well, I know we're running out of time here on this event. I know we still have our prize announcement, but first I wanted to answer the final question here, and that is, how should people get started with Druva? I know we had 2 slides. I'll go to one of them here. Next steps, find your savings using the TCO calculator, get a demo and start a trial, and also the live demo links here on the screen. Tuesday, weekly live demo shows, and you can get Druva as well in the AWS marketplace. Do you want to talk just for a moment about next steps?
Yeah, sure. And also just, David, want to remind folks that we do have a number of additional questions in here. Great questions. I love, that means folks are staying on the line, and I will actually be following up with all your questions. So if you just give me, 24 hours or a bit more, I'll make sure that any of the ones we did not address here are answered. And you also can always reach out to Druva. We're happy to provide you answers. So go ahead, pop on the next slide if you want, or I can do it too.
To the learn more, the Tuesday Live?
Yeah. Well, yeah. So just, all I would say is, the Tuesday Live piece here is a great way to see live demos. There's no commitment for you, right? So you're not necessarily going to have a lot of, you can just show up, and seeing the product in action has been one of the best ways for customers to get the aha lights going on. And of course, you can find us on the AWS marketplace as well. So a great way to sort of explore what we've done, hear what other people say. And we're quite proud of the fact that customers speak highly about us on the various peer review platforms, whether it's a Gartner Peer Insights or G2 or some of the others. So as you think about what you might want to do next, just encourage you to. We've got a lot of different avenues, and we're always happy to engage.
Excellent. Well, I appreciate you getting back to the questions. I know, like you said, there's a ton of great technical questions coming in, and I'm sure the audience will appreciate that. I want to remind everyone the links are on the screen there to learn more and try Druva for yourself. Before we go, I want to award the Amazon $300 gift card that's going out to Liang Sun from California. Congratulations. We'll reach out to you. And Peter, I want to thank you so much for your great presentation today.
Thank you, and thanks everyone for joining.
And thank you to Druva for supporting today's event. And finally, thank you to the audience out there for supporting us and attending today. I hope that you have a great day. I hope you learned a lot, and we'll see you next time. Bye-bye.